We are working through some of the Psalms, through the book of Psalms, helping to be introduced to the Psalms. It is more of a task, than we need to do to look at all of them. We are cherry picking through some of the Psalms to get a sense of how they work, what they're like, how the book is laid out. And I have told you this several times, and I'm sure you're weary of hearing this, that the book of Psalms is divided into 5 books. And each one of those books, the Psalms within that book, are connected to each other. They have a common theme. And if you read through the book of Psalms, you will reach a point where you'll see it'll say book 2. That is not something we added. That is in the original text. And the Psalms were put together in such a way to organize them to some measure. These titles, I've mentioned this before, but I'll just say again, they're not my titles for these books. It's very well put together, and I have lifted this from a person who is far wiser than me, a scholar who has spent much more time in the Psalms and studying the Old Testament than I, and has put together these titles of these 5 books. So I'm borrowing them, I've lifted them, if you want to say it, I've plagiarized them, not in any print sense, but they're not my original titles, but I just thought I'd clarify that for the sake of understanding where those come from. So this morning, we're going to be into book 3. Book 3 is the classic Psalms that we think of when we think of the Psalms. We think of Psalms oftentimes as those cries from our hearts. This is the classic kind of text in the book of Psalms. Just cherry pick some examples. Psalm 74, verse 1 and 10. Oh God, why do you cast us off forever? Why does your anger smoke against the sheep of your pasture? How long, O God, is the foe to scoff? Is the enemy to revile your name forever? You can feel the lament and the weight and the cry of their heart. Psalm 80, verses 4 and 5. Just another cherry-picked example from this book. O Lord God of hosts, how long will you be angry with your people's prayers? You have fed them with the bread of tears and given them tears to drink in full measure. This is the kind of angst that comes out of this 3rd book of Psalms. And often it's the kind of sort of the flavor that we think of when we think of Psalms. When my heart is heavy, this is where I go to. And book 3 are those classic texts of the heaviness and the churning of my own soul and my hunger to say something to God. The 3rd book. Psalm 77 follows almost a typical poetic pattern. If you've been with us, you know that I've been pointing this out to you, that Hebrew poetry peaks in the middle, that the center thought of the psalm is found in the center of the psalm, and everything rises to the middle and everything flows from the middle. And oftentimes the first verse and the last verse are connected. That doesn't seem to be the case in Psalm 77. First phrase, I cry aloud to the Lord. Last verse, verse 20, you led your people like a flock. This doesn't seem to be a direct connection. You can't see directly how this flows. But verse 11, or perhaps verse 10, it's hard to sometimes find the middle. There's no question this is the pivot point. There's no question this is the apex of the psalm. This changes everything. The first half of the psalm, all the way to the middle, is lament. One example from verse 4, the end of verse 4. I'm so troubled that I cannot speak. Then he gets to the middle. I remembered the deeds of the Lord. And now the rest of it is on a high note as it comes down the slope. You are the God who works wonders, to borrow one example of that second phrase. The beginning of it is all lament until he reaches the middle. And then it comes down in praise and adoration and understanding of the character of God. That's sort of the outline and sort of how it goes. Another introduction to this, I'll just introduce you to these names. To the choir master, it is said, according to Jeduthun, a psalm of Asaph. Who are these people? Just to clarify with you, 1 Chronicles 25 introduces them to us, among other passages of the time of David. David was the king. David and the chiefs of the service also set apart for the service the sons of Asaph and of Heman and of Jeduthun, who prophesied with lyres and harps and with cymbals. So they prophesied with musical instruments. That's a poetic way, if you want to say, of saying they wrote the psalms, some of the psalms. That they spoke the words of God through music. That the music that they wrote, the lyrics that they wrote, were inspired of God. We've lost the music. We don't have the tune, but we know the words. And these men were men who wrote under David's authority and prepared the music for the worship in the temple. This is why The Psalms are called the Psalms of David, even if they weren't directly written by David, because they were written under his jurisdiction, under his authority. He asked these men to write. He sanctioned what they wrote. And so the book of Psalms is considered David's book, even if he didn't actually write word for word every one of the Psalms. For example, Psalm 77, which is a psalm of Asaph, but is considered to be a psalm of David in the greater sense. Just to level that confusion if that doesn't mess with your head. 1 Chronicles 25, as if you need to see their names again. They were all under the direction of their fathers in the music in the house of the Lord with cymbals, harps, and lyres for the service of the house of God. Asaph, Jeduthun, and Heman were under the order of the king. The number of them, along with their brothers who were trained in singing to the Lord, all who were skilled, was 288. So these men were not alone. They were leaders in regards to the musicians and the worship of the temple, and they were clearly, to use the phrase of this, they prophesied to the Lord. They were inspired to write these lyrics. And so what we have in Psalm 77 is a psalm of Asaph, attributed to David in that broader sense, and it is a psalm that we do not know the occasion of. It is a psalm that leaves us with some measure of genericness, if that's the right word to use. We don't know what's going on. I cry aloud to God, and he will hear me. We know that he's in anguish because he repeats this phrase, I cry aloud to God, aloud to God. This is a Hebrewism that says, I am serious about this. I am calling out. But what is the occasion that's made him feel this way? We do not know. That's part of the charm of coming to a psalm like this. When it has a generic veneer, if you want to say it that way, it can apply to every one of our lives. Have you ever had a moment where your soul is so deep and so hungry and feeling so lost in the middle of whatever pain has come into you that you feel that you need to cry out to God, that he is the only source? That's where he's going. I cry to God. I cry and he will hear me. But listen to what he says. In the day of my trouble, I will seek the Lord. In the night, my hand is stretched out without wearying. This is a visual expression of him perhaps lying on his bed or standing in posture, and his hand is stretched out. This is the posture of Jewish prayer. We think of prayer, there's no outline, in Scripture on what prayer is supposed to look like. In our 21st century minds, you're supposed to fold your hands perhaps. You definitely have to close your eyes. If you don't close your eyes, you're not actually officially praying. You need to bow your head. Your head needs to be at a 45-degree angle. Your shoulders should slump slightly. On and on it goes. What's the position of prayer? There is no position of prayer. We do these things as an act to physically display where our hearts are or where our hearts should be. Okay? That's what we do. The same thing in the Jewish position of prayer. I'm reaching for God is the idea. My heart is crying out to God and reaching for him. I'm going to display that physically. I am now in the position of prayer. That's what he's saying. In the night, this is how long he's been praying now. I'm calling out to God. And now, whatever time of day he started, now in the night, I'm stretched out without wearying. This is a non-stop crying out for God. And yet, look at the end of verse 2. My soul refuses to be comforted. Wow, that's rough. It seems he's saying that I'm calling out to God, but it's as if the sky is brass. My prayers are bouncing off the ceiling. I don't have any sense that God is hearing me. Can you relate to this? There is a sense that he feels in himself like he's doing, whatever the situation, he's doing the right thing to call on God, but my soul refuses to be comforted. I prayed all night and I still feel guilty, or I've prayed all night and I still feel I'm anxious, or I've prayed all night and I still feel my heart is in grief. Why isn't God answering me? That's what's going on. When I remember God, I moan. Wow, that's not good. His remembrance of God actually brings the opposite effect of comfort. I remember God, I moan. When I meditate, my spirit faints. The closer I draw to God, the more I feel distant from him. The closer I feel like I'm reaching out to him, the farther away I feel that he is. This is what he's saying. You hold my eyelids open. I am so troubled that I cannot speak. This sounds like classic depression. I cannot sleep. You hold my eyelids open. I am now maniac, and I don't want to talk to anybody. Just leave me alone. I don't know what's going on. I can find no comfort. I am in the depths of despair. I am calling on God. He is 1,000,000 miles away. Nothing is changing. Nothing is changing my circumstance. I am just miserable in spirit. Wow, what a pleasant psalm. But it's something that we as human beings can relate to. Now, I don't know if you've ever been in the slumps of despair. Some people go through periods of depression. There are times that there are medical and physical reasons for this. You know, for example, that a woman could give birth to a child and have what's known as postpartum depression, and it's chemical, and they need to see a doctor and all the rest. That's not what this text is about. This text is talking about those times when we humanly know that we are in a place that is dark and deep and lonely, and our hearts don't want to move. And we begin to look inward and begin to feel heavy, and everything is heavy. I don't know if you've had bouts of discouragement on quote-unquote depression, but it is not an uncommon experience. Verse 5, I consider the days of old, the years long ago. Now he's drifting back. I remember the good old days. Things were so much better, and look at now. I remember when everything was shiny and nice. I consider the good old days, the days of long ago. I long for them. I said, let me remember my song in the night. Let me meditate in my heart. This is a quote. Now, this is what he's saying, a song in the night. This is just an expression, it would seem, not necessarily literally singing in the night. Maybe it is. Let me find the joy I used to have, that I can remember days when everything was happy and good and bright and sunny. Let me have that again. Let me remember these days when I could sing through the night instead of crying in anguish through the night. Where are those days? Then my spirit made a diligent search. You notice that there's a colon there. The translators have decided that that needs to be there because here comes a list of what his diligent search was. This is really quite fascinating. This is the conclusion that he begins to reach in the night, in his anguish, in his own distress, in his own discouragement and emotional low. Will the Lord spurn forever and never again be favorable? Well, there's a good question. Has his steadfast love forever ceased? Are his promises at an end for all time? Has God forgotten to be gracious? Has he in anger shut up his compassion? Do you see what's happened here? There are 5 questions that he has asked of God. These are 5 questions. Let's just consider them for a minute. This is how he feels. This is the place that he's in. This is the depths of his despair. Lord, will you spurn? Will you reject? Will you turn your back forever? This is how I feel it. You've turned your back on me. Let me ask you a question. Does God turn his back on you? Don't answer out loud. Don't embarrass yourself. The answer is no. What is he saying? Will you spurn me? Will you reject me forever and never again be favorable to me? What is he saying? He's saying he feels, important word, he feels that God has abandoned him. Has his steadfast love forever ceased? This is how he feels. Let me ask you something. Is it possible for love that is steadfast, by definition, steadfast love, can it cease? If it ceases, it's not steadfast love. Steadfast love cannot cease. So what is he asking? This is how he feels, that God's favor towards him has somehow vanished. Are his promises to an end for all time? If they come to an end, they're not promises. This is how he's responding. He is declaring that in my emotions, this is what it feels like to me. Has God forgotten to be gracious? Does God get dementia, that he forgets things? Is God an old man that he doesn't remember about your life and who you are? Does God somehow suddenly, oh yeah, right, I left you hanging there, sorry about that. Is this our God? Does he forget? Is God always good all the time? Has he in anger shut up his compassion? Does God decide he's going to be angry and that's it? I'm not going to be nice to you anymore. Like a 7th grader, I'm unfriending you from Facebook. I'm not talking to you anymore. That's it, we're done. You've hurt my feelings. Is this God? But this is how he's reacting, because this is what I need to underline this word, this is what it feels like him. And I need to tell you something about your emotions when you're depressed, when you're discouraged, when you're down. Your emotions, my emotions, are not the basis on which you arrive at your theology. Your emotions do not direct your correct thinking about God. Your emotions, if you allow, lead you to a place to begin thinking erroneous ideas about God. And when you settle on those wrong ideas, you stay in a place of discouragement and you feed on your discouragement. The only thing that leads you out of discouragement, as we demonstrate here, is right thoughts, not about yourself, but about God. If you look at the first part of this psalm, it is all about me. I have been crying, and I have been upset, and I have been calling, and I will remember, and I want this. And when you look at the second part of the psalm, the shift is entirely otherly. It is you, it is you, it is you, it is you. This psalm is the remedy to human discouragement. If you take this recipe and apply it to your life, this is the recipe to rescue you from the depths of human discouragement and despair. That's the beauty of this psalm. He reaches this crescendo of asking these questions out of a place of his feeling. If you continually live on your feelings, you will continually be a wishy-washy Christian who never has any depths with God, who flows with the emotions and the moment and everything that comes, and maybe this, maybe that, and you'll always be in trouble in every storm that comes. The person who walks through the storm is the person who is anchored in the character of God. I said, verse 10, I will appeal to this. Now maybe this is the middle of the verse. This sort of begins to tip the scale. I will appeal to this. Here's what he's appealing to the years of the right hand of the Most High. That is the most poetic way of saying something that almost sounds like nothing at all. What are you talking about? I will appeal to the years of the right hand of the Most High. Thank you, that doesn't help me. What are you doing? Does anybody know what this means? I'm going to think about the times when God, in the past, when God by his right hand, God's right hand is seen as his hand of power. I don't need to tell you, I think class, you should know this by now because you've heard me tell you this a number of times. God does not have hands or eyes or ears or anything else, any other human attribute. This is anthropomorphic language that we use to help us understand the incomprehensible God. He uses what we know to borrow from us to explain himself, right? God's right hand, because we're mostly, by and large, right-handed. Doesn't have anything against left-handed people. Don't misunderstand. Don't get weird about this. But by and large, our right hand is our strong hand, generally speaking, okay? So God is right-handed. That's the idea. His right hand is his hand of power. You can trace through Scripture the notion of God's right hand and all that he does with his right hand. He doesn't have hands. He doesn't have arms. It's an expression that we borrow because we know what that means and what that looks like. I am now going to think about all the times that your right hand, that you have done something, that the hand of the Most High has done something in power. His brain, his mind is going to shift from thinking about him to now thinking about the might of God. I will remember, here's our middle verse, we think, or maybe verse 10. I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Now, This is the turning point. I am not going to be thinking about me. I'm not going to be drawing on wrong ideas that I think about God based on my emotions. I'm not going to reach conclusions that God has left me just because I feel like he's not here anymore. I am now going to base my ideas on sound theology of what we know about God's character. I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your wonders of old. Now, can I just say, this is an intentional remembering. This is a pondering. I am going to ponder all your work and meditate on your mighty deeds. This is not recounting and going in your head, oh yeah, I know how creation worked. I know that, but I still feel so discouraged. This is not just you bringing up some things that you remember in your own head. This is not just saying, oh yeah, I know God's all powerful, but right now, this is not you just pulling up back some Sunday school lesson. This is you bringing this into the depths of who you are. This takes work. This takes some consideration in your own spirit. I am going to actually spend the time to ponder, to meditate. These are the words. To think about in the depths of who I am. I am going to get out of this deep funk that I am in by thinking about God. Here's where he goes. Your way, O God, is holy. What God is great like our God? That's a great starting point. God, no matter what I feel like, whatever circumstance has brought me to this place of discouragement, whatever death has happened, whatever job I've lost, whatever friends have left me, whatever discouragement I have because I came out to work and I saw a flat tire and I say, oh, God must be against me today. Nonsense. Your way, O God, is holy all the time. It is always right. God never does anything wrong. It is impossible. What God is great, like our God. He is always good all the time. God, I know this is hard for us to remember this because I know it's hard in my own heart. God allows evil into our lives for his good purposes. God chooses to allow trouble into our lives and into our situation because he has an end that is good. And God in his sovereignty and in his providence and in his overwhelming ability to see all things, knowing that evil exists without ever being the author of evil, chooses to allow an evil experience to come into your life to actually work for his own purposes in your life. He is always good all the time. What a great place to start. When I am in the depths of despair, when I am deep in my heart, you are holy, you are always holy, and you are always good. You are the God who works wonders, he says, who made known your might among the peoples. You are the God who does miracles. Who am I to complain that there's some circumstance in my life and in my heart that I don't like right now, because I know that you can do anything. And everything that you do when you want to do, and you have revealed yourself to people. With your arm, you redeemed your people, the children of Jacob and Joseph. Now here's a little tip. We get a little hint on where Asaph is taking us in regards to what he's about to express here. Jacob and Joseph is a reference to what's going to become the story of the Exodus. You've done great wonders. You're a God of great strength. I remember what you did with Jacob and Joseph. He doesn't say Abraham and Isaac. He doesn't go back that far. Joseph came to Egypt. Jacob lost his son. He went to, you know the story. Joseph ends up in Egypt. And of course, they are delivered. So here is the poetic version. To me, this is so dramatic. I hope I haven't lost you yet, because I just really enjoyed this passage this week. I hope you do too. Verse 16. Here's a poetic way of looking at the Exodus. When the waters saw you, O God, when the waters saw you, they were afraid. Indeed, the deep trembled. What? Obviously, we're personifying, this is poetry. It is personifying the water. The water actually didn't feel fear, but the notion is that as the waters moved, as the sea was parted, that's the picture that he's leading to, that there was a trembling in the waters, that the water itself visually looked like it was in distress. The clouds, keep that image in your mind, trembling waters. The clouds poured out water. The skies gave forth thunder. Your arrows flashed on every side. That's poetry for lightning. Lightning strikes. Now, this is more information about the Exodus than the book of Exodus gives us. So we don't know if this is a poetic exaggeration of what took place during the Exodus or if this is extra information that the book of Exodus does not tell us. But it would seem, according to the text, at the moment that the waters were parting, that it was pouring down rain. That there was lightning, there was thunder. This was not a happy, sunny day. Do you get this? In the midst of God providing for his people a solution, everything was in turmoil. The waters were trembling. The water was pouring down from the sky. The thunder was rumbling. Lightning flashes all around us. The crash of thunder was in the whirlwind. Your lightnings lighted up the world. The earth trembled and shook. This is not a happy little walk through the park. This is not a let's see the water part and we're going to walk through while we're twirling our umbrella and get to the other side. That's not the picture here. This is a picture of tremendous chaos and turmoil. And what is God doing in the midst of all this wild drama? He is leading his people through the middle of it. He's not taking you around it. He's not building a bridge over it. He's not transporting you from one place to another place like you wish happened in Star Trek. This is God leading you right through the sea. And all of the drama is all whirling around you. But what is God's way of doing his thing in your life? Your way, O Lord, your way was through the sea. Your path through the great waters. Can you not see this? The despair that you're in and the turmoil around you. This is God's way of leading you. This is the God who never forsakes you. This is the God who is holy all the time. This is the God who isn't vindictive. He isn't getting back at you because you've done something wrong. He's not trying to one-up you or make things even. It's not foolish, superstitious ideas. He is consistent. He is right. He is good. He is holy. And he has led you to this turmoil and all the drama that's rolling around you to take you right through the middle of it. That's his way. He doesn't skirt around it. His way is to take you through the middle. And verse 10, yet your footprints were unseen. Wow, what a great expression. I had no idea. They had no idea that God was there. They had in themselves would have no feeling of God's presence. All they saw was the chaos of what was around them. The waters parted and they're like, is it okay to go through there? You go try it. I'm not going to try it. Let's get Mikey. He'll do anything. Yeah, if you're laughing, you just dated yourself. What is going on here? Their footprint, God's footprints, there was no reason to believe. In a sense, there was no evidence. They didn't go through that on their feelings. They went through that trusting. By faith, they were led out of Egypt. By faith, they carried on through the wilderness. You led your people like a flock, sheep who have no idea what to do or where to go. I'm not sure. But when God has got your hand, you led them by the hand of Moses and Aaron. Now, I don't know if you've seen this, but there's a little motif that has happened through this psalm as we read it together and as we looked at it. I'm almost done and you're excited, I know. There's a motif that has happened in 3 points through this psalm. Verse 2, in the day of trouble I seek the Lord in the night. My hand is stretched out without wearying. My hand is up seeking God. Verse 10, then I said I will appeal to the years of the right hand of God. So my hand is up. And I'm reaching for the right hand of God. Verse 20, guess what happens? You led your people like a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron. You see what happened? I'm reaching up to find your hand, and I found it. And you're leading me right through the depths of this sea, to the depths of the turmoil, through the craziness around me. When my eyes are on me, all I see is me. When my eyes are on me, all I feel is you've left me. When my eyes are on me, all I conclude is you're not there. All I conclude is you don't love me. All I conclude is that you've done something against me. But when I put my trust in the truth, in the reality of who you are, not in my own emotions, but based it in the theology of your character, my whole perspective changes. And now I realize that in the midst of all of this, it's impossible for you to let me go. That in fact, you're always leading me through the midst of all of these things. That you're always here with me. And my emotions will eventually catch up to that truth. If we live by our emotions, we will always be a confused people. We must be a people of sound theology. We must know our God. Can I remind you politely? It is one of the reasons we are memorizing Scripture through the year. We must put the truth of God's Word in our heart. It is one of the reasons that each year, and we're coming up to it again, that we challenge you to read through the Bible in the year. We're almost through that for 2017, 18. We're coming to the end of it. Put your seatbelts on and your crash helmets in place. We need to read this book and know this book. We need to know our God. We need to stand on Him if we're going to stand up in the midst of our storms. This is Psalm 77.